So 15 years ago in 2010, as soon as I moved back home to Philly, I started a nonprofit called It Takes Philly, encouraging and empowering our children to aim high. And to be part of that program, you had to be a lowest performing school in Philadelphia or Montgomery County to participate. And we took kids out of their communities and brought them to the newsroom, to the courtroom, to the hospital, to barbershops, so they could see what entrepreneurship. We set them up with internships at Comcast. They got scholarships to go on to college. But that's nice. However, you know, in the suburbs, the state spends more money per pupil than they do in our kids in Philadelphia. And so that's where we need to push harder. I'm tired of hearing, well, when their scores come up, then we'll give them more money. Really? That's what we're going with? So we need to push our state reps and the governor to do better and fund our children so they are prepared for the next level, and also apprenticeships. And finally, the health center that I built, we just opened a second one. I have to make payroll every 2 weeks for 35 employees. And they are able to now have health care, and in the community where we built at 21st and Lehigh and also on State Road, it brings in more because people have to eat and so forth. And so I'm part of this.
We'll pass that to Senator Street.
Well, thank you. Look, how do we create better job opportunities for folks? Well, you have to be able to connect them to it. You have to have job opportunities, and two, you have to connect them to it. The Philadelphia Technician Training Institute, PTTI, 19th and Girard. We've been working to support them. We've moved millions of dollars there to allow them to expand. Every 6 months, they're training. They're graduating another 600 people. So in the years we've been supporting them, they've put several thousand additional people to workforce. Folks in the communities like North Philadelphia, like Germantown, like West Philadelphia, like South Philadelphia, where folks are behind, and they're getting them jobs doing things like welding on submarines. They're getting them jobs like creating ships. They're getting them jobs like working on EV cars, and they're doing that work now. This is not something I'm just talking about doing. We've been doing it. We need to expand those kinds of programs and those kinds of opportunities, and we need to make sure that they're properly funded. This is the work that I've been doing as a state senator. This is the work I will do as a congressman. And by the way, we got to continue to fund our increase funding to our public school systems on a regular basis.
Thank you. Representative Seats.
So the first time in decades, given that we have the majority and actually have a seat at the table up in Harrisburg, we've invested millions of dollars that we haven't seen in decades when it comes to the school district of Philadelphia. That's number one. Number two, we have to do more than just invest in basic education. We have to also ensure that we're providing dual enrollment opportunities. And in my role at the Community College of Philadelphia as a board member, I was adamant about ensuring that they weren't just doing dual enrollment with my alma mater, class of 261 at Central High School, but that they actually went to the comprehensive high schools. And we've seen a significant growth in young people being able to take free dual enrollment classes at CCP. Additionally, we just recently created a partnership again with Google that provides free college that will get people into jobs making $75,000 a year with a short-term certificate. So we're providing alternative pathways because not every student wants to go to a four-year institution. And last time I checked, this new generation coming up is more tech savvy than I will ever be. So they want to go into industries that will take them into AI, take them into IT. So beyond being a legislator and actually doing my job in
All right, we'll move on to the next question, and we'll start with Rep. Rob. How do you plan to address the growing threat of anti-abortion legislation and protect the right to abortion in Philly?
Well, you need more folks who believe in reproductive justice, and frankly, not enough men are speaking up on this issue. This is something that is very important when we talk about bodily autonomy. And we can't cede this issue to others. I've seen so many women colleagues of mine talk about their worst moments to try to convince conservatives of their full humanity. It's awful, and men don't have to do that. There's no bodily autonomy restrictions on men for the most part, or boys, which is why those of us who are overrepresented in government have a responsibility to use our privilege to talk about reproductive justice broadly. It's not enough to say, oh, I'm pro-choice. Would you get a gold star for that? No, you gotta lean in and talk about patriarchy, misogyny, and sexism, and talk about how all of these things are connected. I don't need to have daughters to understand this. I have sons, and I want them to know that I stand up for everyone, whether they have a uterus or not.
Thank you. Dr. Stem?
So I'll start by saying we need more doctors in Congress with a lived experience. Unfortunately, I am one of those Black women who was treated with racism and bias, and it impacted the livelihood of a child I did not carry to term. I will fight for reproductive rights. That also includes the right to choose. An abortion can save a life as well of a mother, and it's also in vitro fertilization. Rep. Cephas pointed to the postpartum coverage. I was part of that policy and legislation as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Regional Director, and I worked alongside our Vice President to make sure that coverage extended to a year. Because an educated Black woman in America is more likely, 3 times likely, to die in childbirth than her child than an uneducated white woman, and that must stop, and I will fight to continue to make sure they are protected.
I fully support a woman's right to choose and have done that as a state legislator. We'll continue to do that as a member of Congress. But as Dr. Sanford pointed out, it also impacts IVF. And I think we've got to talk about all the things that are April and I, when we got married, we each had children from previous marriages, but we wanted to try and have a child together. So we went through the process of IVF. It didn't work, but we did try it. And everyone should have that option. And we got to talk about all of the ways that it's impacted. We have to really start educating people about it. If we're going to build a consensus around this issue, people have got to tell their stories. My wife did give me the permission to tell her story. She sits in the front row because we do have to go home together. But I want you to understand, we've got to fight because yes, I want my daughters and granddaughters to have all the rights that my mom and my wife and I had, but we also got to tell our stories because that's part of how we're going to connect with people. That's part of how we're going to build a coalition to actually make people understand that this is a right and what they're trying to do is just wrong.
Thank you. Representative Cephas?
When it comes to this issue for me, it makes me reinforce that elections have